Notice something really important. For some reason, I've left the color out of this wall here. So let's just get a little bit of that yellow. I'll put a little bit of the yellow, a little bit of the alizarin crimson, and we'll just warm up. That happens. It's a bit like, and I'm always warning other people of this, it's a bit like when you're painting a bridge. Maybe it's a bridge over a river or something like that. It's such a commonplace thing to not to forget to paint the gap through the bridge. There we are. You know, I was looking at that thinking there's something I need to be doing there and I'm not doing it. So there we are, that's better. Now I can speed dry. Yeah, it's dry now. Right. Now we go to that 1-inch brush. And this is the bit where we've got to think shadow. We've got to think along the lines of shadow. But as I say, we've got to be quite subtle with it. It's a bright day. There's not only bright direct sunlight on the foreground, but there is sort of that ambient reflected light on the house. Now the house itself, other than that one patch wall there, house, as I say, is in shadow. It's shaded. We don't think of it as a shadow because it's not really that dark. It's not dark enough to look like a shadow, but it is out of the light. If it's out of the light, that means it's in shadow or it's in shade. The wall itself of the house, the main part of the wall, is not in direct sunlight, but because of the brightness and reflection off the foreground, it is receiving a bit of reflected light. I'm going to clean this palette off. Get my little spritz bottle here. Now the good thing is one of the easiest decisions to make here is the color of this mix that we need to put. This is like think of this as a bit of a glaze, okay? And that's why it's so important to make sure that this is dry. A glaze will not work over a surface that is still damp. It's got to be absolutely dry. But what I was going to say is this: the color choice is quite an easy one to make because all we need to do is take the complementary, just as green is the complementary of red and orange, as we've used in the rose. The complementary to the yellow wall is purple. Yellow and purple are complementaries. It's a split complementary in a way, green and orangey reds, because you go towards orange, it becomes a blue complementary, not a green complementary. But you get the gist, I hope. So we're looking at a sort of lilac-y purple color glaze for the house. That means I'm going to start with plenty of ultramarine blue. Just show you my mix here, okay? Ultramarine blue, and you could. There's no harm in using cobalt blue. I think that would work also. Plenty of paint. Now, if I go dunk in this brush in my water to get more water, I'm going to lose all my paint in the water tub. So what I'm going to do is this. Just take with my fingertips, just pick up some water, just to get, just to weaken that mix out a little bit. You can use a pipette. I've got one somewhere. You know the type of thing I mean. That thing there, they can be quite handy. Just for delivering water only. But for me, it's a convenience thing. So I like painting quite quickly, and I can pick up paint with my fingertips. As long as you don't let things get messy. Now then, the next color, of course, would be a cold red. So a bit of alizarin crimson in here. I put a little bit of fresh out because my alizarin crimson in the well is slightly contaminated. So, and fresh paint is essential in most situations. So there's that little bit of alizarin crimson. Now that's a very dark, strong mix. So what I need to do now, let me just show you. quite a dark, that's too dark for what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this mix into my second well down here and take a lot more water again. So I've just added more water, as you saw me do earlier with my fingertips, and that's now a much weaker mix. So I have at the ready some tissue. I like to make that sort of soft, flat face with the tissue, because anything I don't like will come off or be lifted off slightly. And I'll start somewhere really safe, which will be over here somewhere. I might still be a little bit strong, so I'm just picking very quickly and picking up a bit more water. Do bear in mind, though, that things, of course, do weaken off in watercolor. So getting weak, going through the, just painting straight into across that window back there, okay? Now, even less water as I move into this territory here. Do want the windows to be shaded out though, so we'll just run, other than this bottom left-hand corner over here on this window, same with this window recess, bottom left-hand corner, left with a bit of light in it, like that. As I say, this is almost just water now. I'm leaving, I'm skimming, I'm sort of almost crisscrossing to some degree. Now, see how I've left plenty of white on this rose, climbing rose over here? I've crept my weak shadowy glaze right up to the left-hand edge and sometimes into the plant itself, into the climbing rose itself. So I really am almost down to just water here on the right-hand side of the building. And the closer you get to the ground, I find and I feel is the lighter it is, because it's closer to the reflection. The reflected light is going to be at its brightest on the lower part of the vertical wall. So up here, up the top of the building, it's probably, that's where you need to sort of put your gentle shadow. Okay, but with the lower areas, that up to halfway up the window, perhaps, I'd stay out of that wall area with this. Now then, it's funny, it's amazing how this now looks really odd because you haven't given it the same treatment. So that must get the same treatment. I don't think I'm going to put a little bit of shadow back there on this roof, this slight roof there, but there is quite a bit of light hitting that. Now remember, stay out of that wall on the right. That's that little bit of wall that just gets that bit of sunlight. Definitely want some recess. I might go a little bit stronger in the doorway itself. So just picked up a little bit of extra paint like that. And now I think I'm going to put down the flat brush, this 1-inch flat brush for a moment, and return to the brush that we did all the spattering with, the round brush. And this will, this is a slightly stronger mix now. So I'm picking up, so there's where I weakened off that mix with lots of water. But I'm back over to the original mix here in this little area here. And I'm just going to really dance around areas of this this rose, climbing rose over here. If I deliver it, what I'll do in a moment, you'll see me do in a moment, is manipulate it a little bit, distribute this paint, and I do coin this sort of this technique, this method, that it is it's delivery and distribution. So there's my delivery you just saw me make. Okay, I'm cleaning the brush as I speak here, cleaning the brush, leaving a little bit of moisture A little bit of moisture in the brush, and I'm just manipulating that delivery of that purple glaze all the time, being mindful just how much white I'm leaving in the flower areas. Okay, I'm realizing now that I do need to knock back some of that white. It's looking a little artificial, but really you've got to be careful not to get rid of it completely. A little bit more. There's probably going to be less of the white flower or white looking flowers that look as though they're a bit white on the furthest plant, because it's more out of the sun than this one is. Okay, let's leave that rest for a moment, because at the very least I need to give my brain a rest here. It's sort of all there's lots of things asking of me now as to what to do next. So just a little bit of extra dark down here before I just take a little breather, and then we'll deal with the finish. Just thinking of what might be shadowy shapes coming across the foreground here. Shadows here. Right, I probably have to speed dry this again. Soften that off in the bottom of the doorway. Some fine tuning now, a little bit of shadow under there. And I think what I'm going to do, yeah, I'm going to speed dry. Then we're going to look at placing some individual flowers on top of this stuff with the smaller brush, with a bit of white gouache in the mix with the color. Okay, let's get the white gouache out. Whatever I did with it, what have I done with my white? There it is. And I've still got a bit of fresh alizarin crimson up here on the top of my palette. So I'm taking some white paint there, straight from the tube. I'm going to take a small amount of that. That might have been too much, we'll see, of alizarin crimson. And we'll just, now again, I warn you that this can look great initially, and then you do too much. Because it looks good, you think, well, if it looks good, let's have lots of good. So you keep doing it. Next thing you know, the good doesn't look good anymore because it's overdone. Just putting a little bit of that cadmium yellow out. And let me just clean that off a little bit, the brush at least. So I'll take a white and the yellow. Very sticky mix. This is a very sticky mix. This is more akin to what I usually mix up on my little pickle jar lid. So somewhere down here, we'll have a little bit of that pink in the mix and a tiny bit more water because it really doesn't want to come off the brush otherwise. There's a dry brush mark that I'm making. Think about where it might be the flower head that's sticking its head out and catching that bit of sun that's coming down through this angle here. Give it form. This plant has form, remember, okay? It has depth. You can put your hand through it if you want it, if you can avoid the thorns. Think of it as a three-dimensional object because that's what it is. And a little bit of this. Again, I wouldn't use this too much on the furthest rose plant, but so go, if you're going to put anything over there at all with this white mix, make it slightly cooler, the pink colors rather than the yellow peachy colors. So somewhere around here, to say, with every brush mark I make now, I'm asking myself, is that enough? Was that the last shot? Is that the last brush mark I should make? There's a little bit of color around here, but this isn't focal point territory, remember, over here, okay? This is, yeah, we've got to be very careful now. Some of that color I think is too bright over here. It's okay here, but too bright there, I think. Right, yeah. So easy thing to do to knock this back, the slightly brighter roses over there, is that the brush, same brush that I was just using, taking all the paint out of it, trying to get paint off my fingers. I've made a bit of a mess here. I'm leaving a little bit of water in the brush, and I'll just drop casually, carefully the brush onto the surface of the paper here, the belly of the brush, and just agitate an area around here, and you'll see that a very first-hand evidence of how to muddy a color deliberately, okay, to knock back the chromatic value, to knock back the brightness of those colors. And that's, if you wanted it, as we do here, that's how you get a muddier color. It's by mixing your colors more thoroughly. But just by taking some of the brightness out of that one, this becomes the brighter, becomes the one that's really being caught by the sun. Now I'm just sort of going around looking at areas I don't think are working, just scrubbing really. Little bit too much white showing in the areas over here. Knock those back. The bench we can show off with a little bit of white gouache in a moment. Still think there's possibly a little too much white in some areas over here. Got to be careful now. You want a little bit more of everything in this side over here on the right compared to what's over there on the left. Right, I think what we need now is some proper darks just to sit in and give the especially this area here, some proper depth. Okay, so I'm back to my pickle jar lid. I'm back to picking up ultramarine blue like this. It's a bit of cobalt, burnt sienna. There's that glue-like mix again. Okay. So watch what happens when the darks go into this area here. Suddenly everything seems to sort of come to life. And through the foreground, some lines. And if you want to soften some of those darks that you're making, just use the ball of your finger again, just to dot them off. Now, I want our bench. I think I'd like to show off the bench. So I'm painting the underside of the bench. I'll paint the slightly weaker version of what I've got in my hand here. So I've just picked up some water for the shadow of this bench. And if we get a little bit of white gouache on this bench in one or two places, it should pop out. Just checking areas now for depth. I'm going to take my rigger brush, and the best way I can describe this is I'm going to sort of spoil areas, a couple of areas. It might sound a bit weird, but this is the rigger brush again, I mentioned a moment ago, and I'm just tapping a little bit. When I say spoil, I mean just take the flatness out of areas. That's what I really mean. You know, there may be subtle evidence of lines, cracks in the wall. Put a line in like this, press your finger over it a couple of times just to sort of knock it back a little bit. Because despite what the photo says, if we were really there and we were able to walk up to this wall, you'd certainly see a texture in this wall. So if you can't see it, it's nice to know it's there all the same. It's just to have a feeling that it's there. Right, let's turn again to the, so don't do too much of that. So I'm picking up the white gouache again here for some highlights. So I always take my gouache like this, straight from the neck of the paint, tube of the paint. And there was a tiny bit of water in this brush, but really not a lot. Now the seat, actual uplands of that little chair facing the light, just give them a little bit of white gouache. So I took white out, but this is a different type of, when you put in a tiny bit of white gouache like this into areas, it's a different white to that that we left from the white of the paper. But again, don't do too much of it. You can easily do too much of it. Easily do too much of anything. Into the windows, sometimes I like to smudge a bit of white gouache. Helps, sort of gives it a more glass-like effect. Really random, you know, it's just a smudge over the area like that, and then a push around with the finger. And I think really we're done here. My only concern at this stage, I think, is whether the foreground needs to be warmed up slightly heavier here. It's a little bit pale. It's almost as though it's not able to support the weight of stuff that's going on in the background. So before, to try and help establish whether that thought is a good thought or a bad thought, what I'll do is I'll put the mount around it. Always helps. Okay, I think we need to darken up through here a little bit still, and maybe just warm up that foreground a little bit. The round brush just to go through this area down here. So just darken it off a little bit like this. Like that, and then the flat brush to warm up this foreground a bit. A bit of cadmium yellow, bit of the alizarin crimson, bit of the blue. So it's a sort of plummy purple color, okay, a warm purple. I'm just going to skim into that section there. With a bit more warmth, just hitting that area here. Too much white, I think, in these areas here. Okay, I draw the line at doing any more now because I think as far as I can see, it's a done job, you know. It's a shadow of this, whatever it is there. I think, you know, I'm at that point where I think, well, okay, that's really, that's it. That's as far as I want to take it. He said fiddling around here. So please just put that mount back around and be done. So there we are, a quick summary. As suspected, it was always going to be a fight against the twee, a fight against the sort of chocolate boxy sort of scene, okay? But great, I enjoyed it. I hope you folks have enjoyed it, those of you that have been painting along. And you'll get further enjoyment when you perhaps paint it again later at a later date. I think we've kept it as loose as we can. Unless you go sort of verging into the area of abstract, this is probably about as loose as you might be able to go. As I say, anything looser than that, you really are having to sort of think far more abstract in terms of a sort of abstract effect. But yeah, okay, I think the job is done.